are. Love it.
Right. Hey, everybody. Hi, Miss Margaret. How are you? Oh, everybody, I'm so excited you're here today. Happy Monday to you. We are here for another episode of Leading Through the Cracks, where we have real stories, whole women, transformative leadership. And today I have my dear friend, Jolene Pickens with me. And you guys, Jolene is not really on Substack. I just had her create this profile because she's so awesome. And I needed her to come on and tell you guys about your strengths. So
Girl.
hey Ronnie, how are you? Um, so we're gonna have a great conversation today. About bringing your whole self to the table and leaning into your strengths as a woman, as a leader. And so before we dive in, Jolene, why don't you just tell everybody who you are and a little bit about what you do with strengths?
Yeah. Okay. I'm in the consulting space. I'm a organizational leadership developer, and I get the opportunity to sit with people, to sit with businesses, both small and large, government, nonprofit, lots of different spaces, and really help them be intentional, figure out where they are, where they want to be, how they go from now to next. Um, my my job, I feel like, is really unlocking potential. Oftentimes, it's just asking,
Mhm.
cause people to go, "Oh, wait." So I really feel like I have the best role in the world. I came across Gallup probably close to 20 years ago now, in a corporate role that I was in as a psychometric evaluator, just using it to help people hire. It's not actually validated as a hiring tool, but to help people understand who they had on their team. So we were going through hiring tools and acquiring tools and what you do afterward. And I just fell in love with the tool because unlike a lot of others, it really asks the question, what can you do with who you are versus,
Mm.
yeah. So it's like, no matter
Mhm.
what, how can you get there with the puzzle piece that you were created to be? So I just think it really opens up the dialogue to much richer, transparent, talk about radical candor, right?
Mhm. Yes. I love that because I think so often we have conversations around the areas that we need to grow in and that we need to struggle, which is great. We need to grow in those areas, absolutely. But I find that a lot of women sometimes they don't honor their strengths and they don't play into them and play them up and
Mhm.
so I know I've been with you and talking about my strengths, and it's just such a rich conversation and so valuable to be able to use it in so many different ways in your life,
Mhm.
business,
Yes,
professionally, and just in
absolutely.
life and with relationships. And so what do you feel is what do you feel people get when they take the test? Like how can they use this to play into their strengths?
Yeah. Well, I think first and foremost, in the emotional intelligence area, right, the self awareness piece allows you the opportunity then to self manage or grow, right? You can't grow what you don't
Mhm.
know. And so I feel like that piece alone is substantial, right? Putting language to your identity, taking some time to identify, here's who I am and here's what it looks like. Then you can start to put handles on it so that you can walk around with it. I think oftentimes until you do that, you're kind of walking around with this bundle and you don't really know. And then you
Yeah.
can start to be intentional or, maybe aligning a goal or start to be a little bit more focused with where you're headed. But I also think the social awareness component is huge. That other piece of emotional intelligence, because once you become aware of who you are, you're aware of why you show up in a space the way you do, or why you feel the need to minimize in a space the way you do. And sometimes I think there are those things when we start to realize those in a social setting, we can start going into maybe the roots of why we're doing this. Like, why do I feel like
Mhm.
I minimize who I am? Why would I
Mm.
why would I need to do that? And it can help you, I think, even isolate maybe some areas where there's been trauma or pain, or even some areas where you haven't been fully competent in an area, and so you just don't have a good understanding of it. You have some wobbly strength there, but you hide it or whatever. I just think it helps us to, in a social setting, become the best version of ourselves for the people that we lead, for the people we love. So yeah, for me, I feel like you can't really. I mean, I feel like I began to really align my goals with my strengths and saw actual movement when I was able to do that. So for me, I think it's a lot of it is about goal driving, not just for, in a small way or tactically, but also strategic, big goals. Like I want to be known as the person who um, calls people to life. I want to be known as the person who unlocks potential. I want to be known as the person who sees beyond what you say or whatever it is. I think in those spaces, understanding who we are
Yeah.
and how we do that, or where some of the for me, dashboard, like when check engine, when some of the pieces, how do I delegate wisely those things I don't do great? How do I surround myself with people who do that well? So
Mm.
that I can complement, right? And so I think it
Mhm.
also helps to kind of go, here's what I don't. I don't do this well. It's a need. It needs to
Mhm.
happen. I don't do it well. I can work all day to do it, or I can find either someone who does it well or
Mhm.
another combination of strengths to get what I'm looking for.
Mhm.
Anyway, so
Yeah, I love that. I love that. As you're talking, I'm remembering conversation that you and I had
yeah.
about my strengths because whenever I took the strength finders test with you, I had taken it, I don't know, maybe 5 years prior to that.
Mhm, mhm,
And I remember that my the top 5 had kind of transitioned a little bit, but everything was still the same strengths
mhm.
in my top 10, but they had kind of moved in and out. And it was partly because when I took them the first time, I was not in school as for my doctorate in leadership. And then once I did, they changed a little bit. And I loved how you were explaining that to me about, so anyone who's taken strength finders before, yeah, I don't know if you have taken it, tell me if you've taken it. But, when I took it, I've taken it twice. And the second time, things had shifted. And I love how you talked about that and how you framed that for me to understand just like the essence of who I am and what I might need in a different season. So, could you speak to that a little bit? How the results come and how they can shift over time?
Yeah, yeah, I think, your dominant strengths don't shift. They usually don't go in and out of what I like to call that 10-lane highway, where the top 10 are pretty much always in that top 10. They may have a different space in the top 10, like they may be 3 and they may be 6, but they're kind of all
Mhm,
dominant. And really, those are the strengths that are, um, they're like the strengths that are when you're in a good space, it show up this way. When you're in a bad space, you show up this way. So they're the strengths that really um, help define who you are, good, bad, and otherwise, right?
mhm,
The limbic system of your brain, 70% of every decision you make is intuitive. And so really 70% of the time, you're going to show up this way. Those are the strengths that you see in that dominant top 10. So sometimes we unlock
mhm,
the top 5 and we don't even see the 6 through 10 because Gallup's a for-profit company, right? So, but they're in there, and when you unlock them again, or maybe you take the assessment again, you just do the top 5, maybe 6 has shifted into 4, and so it
mhm,
feels as though you've shifted a lot more than you truly have. They're a bit
mhm,
like a muscle. I like to think of them as a muscle. So if you're in a space where you're really working out a certain muscle, sometimes one of those strengths might go up to number 1 or shift back to number 3, depending on, the nature of it. The only time we see huge shift, is really in extreme trauma type things.
mhm,
I've done a lot of work in the addiction space, and I've seen some people who have actually shifted from the bottom to the top. Maybe one strength like restorative and maximizer might flip around
mhm,
based on maybe some of the mindset growth that they've had inside of the space of addiction, and breaking free and learning some new thought processes in the journey. Yeah. So, but that's more rare. then our norm that we see is just really more of a kind of a switching out the strength, type thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
We're stepping into school, we're stepping into work, we're stepping into parenthood, we're stepping out,
Mhm.
whatever. There's a continuous learning journey, right?
Mhm.
So I think that refining, the refining that goes on during those times oftentimes makes us use a different muscle or a different strength or theme or talent, whatever. Those kind of are interchangeable phrases there: strengths, themes, talents. Uh,
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah, I love that. Okay, I see that, Ronnie has told me that she has taken it. Yes. Okay,
okay.
great. Yeah, I like I said, have taken it twice, and I love it so much that, um I was talking to Jolene the other day before we got on here and just kind of chatting through. And one of the things that we talked about was how you can use the strengths assessment to help you um, kind of frame how you're going to show up in like business. And a lot of women who come to me for coaching, that's one of the things that they are looking for is like they have all these ideas, they have all of this, you know, and they're usually creative women. So usually very creative and all the ideas are flowing all over the place, but they don't really understand how to move into them. What do they need to do? And so, one of the things that am excited about that Jolene and I have been talking about is me hosting a workshop about that, specifically about that.
Yeah.
Um, Later in the coming months, but I'm just really excited about that. But I wonder, Jolene, if you could share if there's any example or story about either a woman or a team of people that have taken the strengths assessment and they have been struggling with, you know, either interacting with each other or how to bring an idea together. And then after the strengths assessment, there was more clarity in how they were to be operating or how they wanted to show up.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. One of the things I think, the biggest thing that strengths has done, I think, in the teams, I see it all the time. I have thousands and thousands of teams, right? Um, and there's this overarching thoughts, I think, that happen when they take a look at their individual results and they get an idea of what it actually means. Sometimes there's a little bit of, what do you mean by the word discipline, or what do you mean by the word command, or whatever, it might be.
Mhm.
But once they agree with the results and they're able to kind of then sit with them and go, okay. Then they ask, like, where have I seen these strengths manifest in my work or my interactions with people?
Mm,
You can start to identify, this is what I'm doing when I do this, whether at a networking event or a boardroom table or an interaction with a coworker at the water. Whenever you start seeing that strength show up, then you're able to recognize, I feel really energized when that happens, and you can start aiming it toward a goal. And so
mhm,
for me, it's that combination of naming, you know, claiming it as your own, seeing when you've been successful, and then aiming it towards a goal that I see. When that starts to unlock in a team, then it becomes, the dialogue I had with you was your need, not my lack. And when you
mm,
can hook on to the idea that you're asking questions, not because I didn't do something right, you're asking because you need more information. All of the sudden, the communication between us starts to get better. It starts to get looser, more accessible. And I've seen this over and over and over, especially um, inside of peer groups. I do a lot with peer groups, and this is something that really is. Um, it feels like it's a little easier sometimes to first unlock it. You see a full team of people, you see your individual strengths, and you go back through the team and see, wow, we're really high in these two executing strengths
mhm,
and these two strategic thinking strengths, but we only have one relational strength, and it's relator. So we kind of like to work with the same people all the time, and we get a lot done. We're strategic, but we don't let a lot of people in. Then you start to go, oh, the some of the things that have been said about us is people really don't know who we are. So then you can start unpacking, what would it look like to let more people in. who would we lean on looking at the individual strengths? Well, you have a little bit in here. What would you do? So then when you start to really feel good and how to claim them for yourselves, you can start to look beyond at the team and see who has what
Mhm.
might be needed overall to start unlocking. And then it's not so much about roles, it's about strengths. You really
Yeah.
start, right? Because something that is such an interesting thing with strengths is we don't intuitively know what we do well. We don't intuitively know it. It's like we don't think to ourselves, um, wow, I'm good at this. We're just good at something. And
Mhm.
so much so that when someone says, how do you do that? You're like, kind of, what, how do I do what?
What is it? What?
You mean, what do you mean by that? Well, how do you
Mhm.
have that conversation with someone? I'm not sure. Oh, you're so amazing. And you're kind of almost uncomfortable because it's like, what are you actually referring to? Because I don't really know what you're asking because
Mhm.
it's so intuitive, right? And in
Mhm.
the same way, whenever something is really, really hard for us, while we tend to try to go after it, we go after it with the idea that we have to do it that way. Maybe just like
Mhm.
whoever it is that's been doing it, right? So we're not always sure of what we do. We do tend to know what we don't do well. So
Mhm.
we don't practice what we do well or try to get really good at it or even think about a way to maybe get this thing accomplished over here with who we
Mhm.
are. And in the space where I've been able to unpack, what is it you're trying to accomplish here? Trying to accomplish focus. I don't have any
Mhm.
focus. Okay. So let's talk about what you do well. What you really do well is you pivot. You're a pivoter, right?
Mhm.
You're also an achiever. All right. So, what would it look like to pivot 15 minutes a day to achieve a goal for 15 minutes, shut everything down and achieve this goal? Just 15 minutes, not 2 hours. And then by the end of the day, maybe in 6 hour blocks, we actually have an hour and a half of something. So, it almost looks like we were focused or goal driven, but we actually did it in smaller increments because we don't have the ability. A squirrel will so it is about really understanding what it is in that space. And that's something I feel like has happened on multiple levels. There was one particular team I can tell you about. And this was a team of people that after we took the strengths finders, they one of the things that they had a little hard time with was their heads were down. They were hard workers. I would say maybe a type A, very red drivers, right?
Mhm.
And, but they
Mhm.
had a little hard time with retention. They were really struggling in the retention space. And so we looked at an overall team, and every single one of the top leaders on the team was driven in that execution domain, head down, moving forward. And the other element was strategic, with very little relation.
Mhm.
The team I was referring to. So one of the things they did in the retention area was they begin to strategically ask the question, what does it look like to work here? What is the best, combination of people to work here? They couldn't come up with a strengths thing, but what they could come up with was taglines. So because
Mhm.
they were driven strategically, they came up with these marketing taglines. Maybe marketing would be a good way to say it, but like, if you love to get things done by 5, if you love to hit deadlines on time, if you're the kind of so they begin to try to define their culture inside the context of what had worked well for them. And it doesn't mean that just because they were high in getting things done that they didn't love to work with people. It wasn't about that. But they were struggling with having the right language to interview with and set a culture tone, right? So it did start to shape. It started to shape the applicants they got. They began to get
Mhm.
totally different applicant because if I'm not the girl that wants to do that, I'm just not going to apply. And
Right.
they didn't make as many excuses or, they weren't uncomfortable with who they are. They were very accepting, because not everybody worked fast. Some people actually worked much slower, much more of that deliberative, but they just really enjoyed getting stuff done. That's what and you might say, well, everybody likes that. Really, that doesn't drive everybody. Not everybody's
Mhm.
driven by that. I like getting stuff done, sure, but that doesn't drive me. And so to
Mhm.
understand the language strategically around how to help someone understand if it drives them really changed their numbers. And at the end of they did 2 campaigns, and they were both about 8 weeks. And at the end of that time, they actually got 6 candidates in, and of those 6 candidates, 5 at least are still working. So it's a huge
Wow.
shift. Yeah. So it's a
Yeah.
small, simple thing. It seems like that seems really simple. They could have probably figured that out without all that. But the reality is, I think the understanding of here's who we are that works well. And we have these pieces, but what are we missing on? They did a SWOT analysis, and what we're
Mhm.
missing out on is people that stick around.
Mhm.
So instead of just labeling their culture as bad, we've got, this or this wrong. They started saying what we do well. What do we do well? How do we
Yeah.
market what we do well?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, Kelly saying, um, getting things done by time is not her driver either. It's just the enjoyment of the task and the energy of her mind that gets her going. Yes.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Kelly, hey, Kelly. Kelly's amazing. Kelly was on with me last week and was talking about similar things like in productivity and things that she realized about herself that she needed to make some pivots. And so this is like, I'm getting so excited as you're talking about this because I'm imagining bringing this to my audience in a workshop form and how
Mhm,
powerful that could be. And but also, Jolene, as you were explaining all of the different things that happen when you start talking about the strengths and the awareness that people have, like, oh, it's not your lack,
mhm,
it's I need more information or you need more information. It makes me think about how powerful that concept is in family and
mhm,
in parenting
mm.
and marriage. Like that is it,
Yeah.
have you done strengths with like couples or
Yes.
families?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yes. We do use it, and my husband and I operate in a space where we do a lot of premarital counseling, and it's something that we use regularly because one of the things it's a communication tool at its heart. And it helps you to understand your way of communicating, your preference of communicating, your style of communication, and it focuses on the things that are going to come out when you communicate, or maybe that don't come out, right? So you can explore different applications if you're in conflict, if you're, if you're a strong analytical and somebody is coming at you with maybe a way you did something and you're like going to ask a lot of questions that could come across as
Mhm.
defensive. And so, yeah, being able to recognize the importance of just saying, can I ask some questions about where you're coming from? Just like
Yeah.
all tools like that. So developing some action plans or tools, I would say, that help you to use that strength in the most, not in the raw, but in the mature, right? Because there's
Mhm.
light and shadow to every strength. But the more aware you become of what it looks like when it might be in the raw, the easier it is for you to start really using it in that place of growth. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
love that.
It's great with relationship. It's great with parenting. And as a grandparent now, it's really been powerful for me to be able to even point on and say, this individual has this kind of hardwiring, and they're young. And of course, we have them for explorers. I love the Clifton Strengths for explorers. They're, for little guys. There's only 3, they only do 3 strengths, and they're bigger, they're broad kind of buckets, but it helps parents
Uh,
to kinda go, "Ah, so this is kind of the way they're bent. They're bent like here, how do I help nurture
that's really cool. I didn't know that they
yeah,
had that for the littles.
the
That's
little guy?"
awesome.
Yeah.
Um, okay, my partner and I had to find the best way to communicate. He's analytical and I have ADHD and lots of question modes. Yes, I'm sure.
Yeah. Yeah,
I'm sure.
when it's a big one. When someone's analytical too, you have to prove your work. So it's like you've got to come to them with, here are 5 or 6 things I've looked up. I'm sure there's more. I'd love for you to be able to pick this apart and tell me some things you'd like to see, right? I'm
Mhm.
I'm doing this now while I'm thinking about it. I won't be able to focus later, but I'll have a window, so it is if you've got the ADHD thing going. But I do think
Yeah.
and engaging, in exploring like the application, the best application, the most mature application of our strength is really
Mhm.
powerful to recognize
Mhm.
this is an area that I'm really going to get a lot of movement in. This is an area where I might struggle a bit more and being able to balance those out, right? So I
Yeah,
think it's
so
huge. Yeah.
so helpful. Wow. I'm like I'm so like giddy. I'm like Strengths. Can't
Strength.
wait for the workshop. So I know Kelly's going to be in the workshop with us because she's in the comments like, yes, I'm in. I'll definitely let everybody know when that's going to happen. But um, so I we've talked about the awareness that happens when you start to understand the strengths. And
Mhm.
we've talked about different applications, business, teams,
Mhm.
um, family, kiddos. I love the kiddo one. Like, how amazing is that to be able to look at your kid, or if you're a teacher, to be able to kind of like look in to this child and be like, "Oh yeah, they're developing in this way," and like speak into that and help them shape that a little bit. And I really love that. Um it's so interesting. I don't think I even got to tell you this, Jolene, but I was just recently asked to be a part of a homeschool network. So isn't that cool? Like,
Yeah.
so, yeah, it's a homeschool network, and they have asked me to be the subject matter expert for student wellness. And I feel like this is something
Mhm.
that I could, suggest as part of the program that I'm developing for student wellness because,
Agreed.
just helping them understand their strengths and how they can show up in the world. And I just think that would be beautiful for not only the student themselves, but the parents who are part of
Mhm.
the homeschool
Absolutely.
community to be able to, help them encourage their children and lean into those bents. And it's just awesome. I love There's so many ways that I think it can be helpful in our personal and professional lives. It's
Yeah.
phenomenal.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that I think that happens so often when we're in growth too, you can have a fixed mindset and a growth mindset, right? And everything.
Mhm,
Each individual strength will tend toward it's a pretty specific. It can be very specific. My growth mindset versus my fixed mindset, an activator, right? So an
mhm,
activator, I'm a part on a car. I'm the accelerator. Let's talk, more action. Come on, let's do this thing. Let's go. In my raw, I can come across like fire, ready, aim, right? So understanding in my mature, I'm going to wait a second and make certain that we have enough information to make a very solid movement forward. So sometimes my fixed mindset and my growth mindset are opposing one another, right? My growth mindset is like, well, let's ask a couple more questions, right? Because you're not just one strength, you're the combination. But my fixed
mhm,
mindset is no, strike while the iron's hot. The iron will cool down. You will not have another opportunity. So I think the idea with growing, especially children and relational, any kind of relational, is really being able to embrace the challenge of both of those things and get feedback. What does this feel like to you? Does it feel
mhm,
like I'm rushing? Do you feel like
mhm,
you have enough information? Knowing that I tend toward fire ready aim, do you think we have enough information? What else would you gather before you? So it really, I think, helping you to learn from maybe sometimes when you failed, and that's a really powerful thing. If you're bent a certain way, to be able to recognize it as an actual then you can continue to grow and become even stronger. And by picking it apart and kind of going, well, inside of this, is it time to move forward? I know I'm the first one in the room that wants to, but is there something else we're waiting on? Being able to see it in the space, you can embrace that challenge, I think, is
yeah,
really what I'm saying. Yeah. And keep
yeah,
it from becoming a fixed mindset. It just has to be now or never versus, what else do we need? And
mhm,
I think especially when you're growing children or any nuclear like if you're starting a new relationship or you're,
mhm,
growing children, any kind of a genesis, it's always in that space, I think, but more so when you're learning someone, you're almost taking certain things for granted. Like you don't know, there hasn't been the kind of trust, or you don't have the experience that you will have. You haven't crossed enough of those bridges to really be able to say, this will blow up if I do it too soon. You don't know that. So
mhm.
teaching people to seek that feedback, I think, is a huge piece with growing strengths. Yeah.
Yeah,
Better
yeah.
leverage them. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I see that. I can see how it would help with conflict resolution and all
Mhm.
of the challenges that we come up against in relational
Mhm.
type situations. Yeah, yeah, I love it. Okay, like one last little thing I wanted to touch on, and that is when people unlock the entire, what is it, 32? I
34. Yeah.
34,
Yep.
34 strengths. And then there's the ones that are fall out of the top 10.
Hmm.
What does that mean? And like, should they pay attention to those? Like,
Okay,
what do you
sure. Well, the one thing, all 34 strengths are inside of you. They're all in there
Mhm.
to varying degrees, right? So your top 10, and it may not be fully be 10. We cut it off at Gallup at 10 because it's just kind of the easiest for us. But you're really the only person that can say if it's not dominant. And the way you would know that is if you can turn it off or on. So the
Mm.
moment that you can turn something off and on, it's no longer dominant for you. It becomes a supporting strength. You can pull on it. You can turn it on when you need it, turn it off when you don't.
Mm.
But your dominant strengths are not turn off and onable. They are just, yeah, it's like, so
They
that's why the power in knowing them is so great. People get, when I get the full 34 reports to people, rush to the bottom and look at 30, 31, 32, 33, and 34. They're like, I knew it. My empathy would flow or whatever. And I say, you'll never have as much trouble with those bottom 5 as you do the top 5 if you don't understand what they do and what they don't do, because you can't turn them off. You'll never have as much trouble at the bottom with those bottom 5 as you do with the top 5 if you don't know what they look like, what they act like, because you can't turn those off. So if you're not aware of what it looks like in the raw and the mature, the light and the shadow, it will always trip you up more than not having those bottom 5. And yet we're real concerned about those, right? So I
That's
feel
so
like,
interesting.
yeah. So the biggest thing to note in that is the top 9, 10, maybe 11 are dominant. And again, you can say when you understand the strength and you really start to get the definition, you can go, oh, I do that. I think you know what? Sometimes I don't do that. If you can turn it off, then it slips over to that supporting strength. So that being
Mm.
said, yeah, um, that next grouping of supporting strengths, which would be maybe 11 through 22, if we're using the same analogy, or 23 for whatever, those are going to be supporting. If these are like a 10-lane highway, like I mentioned, you could go back and forth. This would be like a 2-lane highway, that next group
Mhm.
of 10 or 12. Um, as long as you're teed up, somebody kind of tees you up and says, here's what it is, and here's what we're doing, and I just need Jolene to do this, and this, you're going to do fine in those. And then the bottom ones in that same analogy would be considered your lesser strengths. They're not even considered a weakness unless one of them is keeping you from being proficient in a role. And so, if that's the case, then we got to take a look at it. But 9 times out of 10, whatever it is, if your role requires you to do this,
Mhm.
um, then it could potentially be a weakness. But if it requires you to do a combination of making sure this gets done, you might be able to do it with who you are. And that's really the value, is looking at
Mhm.
what's the goal in this. And if it's a hard stop, nursing, you have to be able to draw blood. Well, if you don't know how to do that, that's not going to work. But most of the time, if you giving care to someone, that part of it, like, well, I don't have empathy down here, but I can give care through analytical and connectedness. I can ask a question to connect to their pain and understand where they'd like to see themselves, down the road. So you can do what it is with who you are if you understand what it is, right? And I feel like that's the thing that helps us to define, is that next grouping, because we ask a different question. We think, why is this actually a weakness, or why do I think that I need this? And those are really powerful questions to sit with. Yeah.
Mm. I love that. That's so, and I love what you said that I think when people hear about assessments like Strength Finders or, any of the other ones, they automatically go into it looking at, okay, what am I doing good? What don't I have? Where am I lacking? And I like how you explain that all of the strengths are in all of us. And this is just a measure of showing how dominant or not dominant they are, but they're all in there.
Mhm.
And I love that aspect of it, because I think so often we're looking for our where
Mhm.
we're lacking, and it's
Sure.
not necessarily a matter of lacking, it's a matter of how is it showing up in your life, and what shows up more often, and like you said, what can you
Yes.
turn on and turn
Yep.
off and all
Yeah.
of those. It's
Yeah.
kind of like a different way
Yeah.
of framing it.
Yeah.
So,
I love that too. And then something that comes out in that, Nicole, is I think the thing with strengths is it's at it, it helps you to think about win-win. You're seeking win-win solutions. You're looking for, it's almost like you begin utilizing negotiation skills, going, okay, I'm not good at this. Who is?
mhm,
Versus feeling as though I've got to get good at this. I have
mhm,
to be able to. Now, it doesn't mean that, there's not some part of your role that you have to do and you're not great at it. But if it's the premier part of your role, I always ask a
mhm.
different question, why is that your role? But the reality is, right, to finding solutions that satisfy everyone causes this collaboration. It's like you're focusing on mutual interests rather than positions. Like you encourage
Mhm,
people to cooperate or compromise instead of, because you understand that hardwiring is causing them to move toward a certain thing. So it can become less polarizing and more like a unity, a team spirit, all for one. Like, you're going to bring this, I'm going to bring this. I'm not expecting you to know this. You're not expecting me. And I don't have to just do it your way, but
mhm,
I can glean from you and go, oh, that's why you do that. It is effective. I didn't realize that. I could probably do that effective trick with this piece. And so it just causes, I feel like
mhm,
it can cause these win-win solutions that everybody feels a bit more um, in it, more team versus, I think, even that kind of solo run that the DIY kind of
mhm,
mentality that we tend to have.
mhm. Yeah,
Yes.
I love it.
Yeah.
Love it. Well, thank you so much for sharing this with us today.
Thank
I'm excited. Yeah, yes, I'm so glad. For those of you that weren't on the in the beginning, I was saying that Jolene is not really on Substack. I had her come on to the app just because she's a dear friend of mine and she's amazing. And I wanted you guys to hear the conversation. So she's here with us and um I just thank you for sharing your wisdom and your knowledge and we're excited for the workshop. Everybody, there's going to be a workshop that I'm Jolene and I are going to partner on to bring this strengths workshop together, and so you'll, definitely stay connected with me. You can subscribe to my channel to stay in the loop with that. But thank you again for just your wisdom and helping us understand ourselves and just our strengths a little bit more. And we look forward to the workshop. And for those of you that don't know me and are just hopping on, again, I'm Nicole from Mosaic Life, and I am here every Monday with a different powerful woman, wonderful conversation about women in leadership. And when we talk about women in leadership here, we are talking about not just women in leadership roles, official leadership roles, but in how you lead your life and how you show up every day.
you.
So thank you for being here. And I hope you'll join me next Monday. And again, thank you, Jolene. And we will see you next time. Thanks, everybody, for joining.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.